Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're going to dig into something that connects the dots between what's happening right now in the Middle East and a story that actually started a full century ago. The source we're diving into kicks things off with a pretty pointed question. It looks at the issue of Palestine and basically asks, why is it that for all their power and wealth, many of these powerful Arab nations just can't seem to get on the same page and act independently? Well, according to this source, the answer isn't something you'll find in today's news cycle. Nope. To really get it, we have to go back in time, back to the final, chaotic days of a massive empire, exactly 100 years ago. All right, so let's set the stage. We're talking about the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, it was this huge, sprawling power. But by this point, it was, for all intents and purposes, on its last legs. The whole thing was starting to crumble from the inside. Okay, so for about 400 years, the Turkish Ottomans had ruled over the Arab world. But here's the thing the source really hammers home. This wasn't your typical empire colony situation. See, for centuries, the Arabs hadn't really staged any major revolts. And why is that? Well, the Ottomans weren't just ruling as Turks. They were ruling under the banner of a pan-Islamic caliphate. This religious authority was the glue that held it all together. But then, everything changed. There was this major power shift from within. A group called the Young Turks, who were super nationalist and secular. They basically took control. They pushed the Caliph aside and brought in this new Turkish-first ideology. And who did they blame for the empire's problems? According to the source, they pointed the finger at Islam and at minorities. And that, of course, included the Arabs. So you can imagine what happened next. The Young Turks started suppressing the Arabic language and culture, and that created this massive rift. And you know who was watching all this unfold? The British. They saw this division and thought, this is a golden opportunity for us. So Britain's strategy was pretty clever. They knew they couldn't just smash the Ottoman Empire from the outside. That was too tough. No, they needed someone on the inside. They needed a really influential Arab leader who could light a match and start a fire. A rebellion from within. And wouldn't you know it, they found the perfect man for the job, Sharif Hussein bin Ali. Now, this wasn't just some random choice. The source makes it super clear that the British picked him very, very carefully. He had a set of credentials that nobody else did. So what made him so special? It was all about his lineage. I mean, this guy was a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad's family, and his family had controlled the holy city of Mecca for over 700 years. That gave him an incredible amount of religious and political street cred. He was pretty much the only person who could even dream of uniting all the different Arab groups. So the British come to him with this unbelievable offer. They basically say, listen, you lead a revolt against the Ottomans and unite the Arab people, and we'll make you the new caliph, the leader of all Muslims. And we'll give you a single unified Arab state, stretching all the way from Iraq to Egypt. I mean, it was the dream of Arab independence handed to him on a silver platter. And just like that, with this incredible promise on the table and the people of Mecca behind him, Sharif Hussein did it. In 1916, he launched the Great Arab Revolt. Now, you have to understand the timing here was absolutely brutal for the Ottomans. They were already bogged down fighting World War I on multiple fronts, against Russia, Britain, France, you name it. They were stretched so thin. And now, all of a sudden, they've got a massive rebellion popping off from inside their own borders. It was a complete disaster for them. And the British weren't just sitting back and writing checks either. Oh no. They sent in one of their key agents to basically guide the whole rebellion. You've probably heard of him, T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. And here's where it gets really interesting. The source points out that Lawrence of Arabia himself interviewed Sharif Hussein's 3 sons, and he's the one who chose which son, Faisal, would lead the revolt. And why did he pick him? Not because he was the best general, but because Lawrence thought he'd be the most loyal to the British. Think about that for a second. The British weren't just supporting the revolt, they were hand-picking its leadership to suit their own agenda. Okay, so fast forward to 1918, the revolt works. It's a huge success. The Ottoman Empire is basically a shadow of its former self. So now it's time for the British to pay up, right? Time to make good on that big promise. The Arabs had totally delivered their side of the bargain. They did exactly what was asked of them. And now they're waiting, expecting to get what they were promised, their unified state with Sharif Hussein as their leader. But yeah, that's not what happened. Not even close. Because in secret, the British had already signed something called the Balfour Declaration. And what did that do? It promised a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, the very same land they had just promised to the Arabs. It was a total betrayal. Things really hit the fan in 1924. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk officially gets rid of the Ottoman Caliphate in Turkey. Seeing this power vacuum, Sharif Hussein makes his move. He declares himself the new caliph of all Muslims. And for Britain and France, the alarm bells start ringing loudly. All of a sudden, Hussein wasn't their useful ally anymore. He was becoming this powerful, independent leader who was directly standing in the way of their plans for the region. The British decided Sharif Hussein was just too independent. He wasn't playing by their rules anymore. They needed a leader who would follow their orders, plain and simple. So, what did they do? They decided he had to go. And they found that leader in a man named Abdulaziz ibn Saud. The source says he was ready to accept every single British demand. So, the British switched their support, backing Ibn Saud with money and weapons, who then went to war against, you guessed it, Sharif Hussein. And here's how it all played out. Ibn Saud conquers Sharif Hussein's territory. Sharif Hussein himself gets arrested by the British and exiled to Cyprus. The dream of a unified Arab state totally permanently shattered. Instead, Britain and France carve up the Arab world into all these small, separate countries: Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and so on. And in each new state, they installed rulers who were loyal to them. The source argues this wasn't an accident. It was the whole point, to create a divided Middle East that would be easy to control. And this brings us right back to that question we started with. Because the argument from this source is that this system of control, the one they set up 100 years ago, it never really went away. The source claims that the playbook they used on Sharif Hussein just got repeated over and over again for decades, with the US eventually taking over from Britain. It lists a whole bunch of examples: King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, Morsi in Egypt, Gaddafi in Libya, Saddam in Iraq. The idea is that any leader who got too independent and pushed back against Western interests, well, they were made an example of. So when you look at it that way, the source connects a full century of history right to our doorstep. And it leaves us with this one big, thought-provoking question. If the map of the Middle East for the last 100 years was drawn by outside powers, who's going to be drawing the map for the next 100?